Welcome to the Troubled Artists Podcast, episode 26, Bonnie Clevering.
Welcome back to the Troubled Artist Podcast. Today I am here with Bonnie Clevering. Bonnie Clevering has spent nearly 5 decades as a motion picture hairstylist, working with stars like Hilary Swank, Brad Pitt, Julia Roberts, Elvis Presley, Kristen Stewart, Keanu Reeves, and Al Pacino. Her career spans over 120 productions, including Hello Dolly, RoboCop, Any Given Sunday, Office Space, Erin Brockovich, Ocean's 11, and The Twilight Saga. Bonnie has been a member of the Academy since 2001 and has recently released her pictorial memoir, Continuity with Bonnie Clevering, Life Beyond the Credits. So Bonnie, thank you so much for being on the show. So before we begin, I do like to ask this question. Tell us in your own words, who is Bonnie Clevering?
I'm a mom. Was a wife. My husband passed away when he was 55. And I'm very creative and I always have loved movies. And in order now to look back at my career, that I was able to work on all these different films and be part of the industry, it really, really excites me. And I love talking about it and sharing a lot of my experiences with others.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I'm a filmmaker myself. I'm an independent filmmaker from Chicago.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to hear some of the stories that you have and the advice that you want to give. But before we get into that, I am curious to know just how you got into hairstyling in the first place. Like, what inspired you to begin your journey in Hollywood hairstyling? Was it something that you discovered early in life or later on in life? Just tell us about that.
Well, I was raised near you, Aurora, Illinois. I was always active in a lot of the different plays and performances all through school. And I would do the hair and the makeup, whatever. And I also just loved, back then it was called Photo Play magazine with all the actors in it and stories and everything. And I just thought, oh, they just enticed me. And I just would look at these hairdos. So when I graduated from high school, I couldn't afford, plus, I had no desire to go to college. So I went to beauty school and became a hairdresser. And then my family was in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And I was really into working at a salon and doing different colors and whatever. And then that's when a lot of wigs came out for just the average woman. And so I start working on wigs and fitting a lot of my customers with wigs and cutting them and so forth. And then my husband and we got married in Fort Lauderdale and took Route 66 to California. Didn't know where we are going to eat, sleep, drink, or work. And I ended up getting a California state license. And I was going to go to work in a beauty salon, and lived around people that worked at Warner Brothers and different studios. And one of the gentlemen one day said, "Why don't you try to become a hairdresser in the studios?" And I thought, yeah, every hairdresser's dream. And so finally, his name was Lou, and Lou said, "You're going to come." And I'm working on the Beverly Hillbillies in Petticoat Junction. This was in the 60s. And he said, "I want you to meet the hairdresser." So I met Carmen, had lunch with her, and then she made a phone call right after lunch to the head hairdresser at Fox Studios and said, "I just met a gal that I think could be a real asset to our business." So then I had to go through the different ranks and training and so forth. And then just really loved what I was doing. But then my goal was in life was to be a mom. And I knew that was going to interfere. But I had a infertility problem, and all of a sudden I'm working with Elvis Presley and Nancy Sinatra. And Nancy gives Elvis's wife, Priscilla, a baby shower. And she invites me. So I go to Nancy's house with my gift for Elvis's baby. And halfway through the shower, Nancy said to Priscilla and myself, both you stand up. I want you to do something. And I thought, what in the world is she up to? And So it's an old Italian wives' tale to rub both your hands on the pregnant woman's stomach, and it's supposed to bring you luck. And that was the month I got pregnant. And I had my son Jason. And so it just kind of all my stories throughout my whole career, and lots of Elvis Presley stories that I just have enjoyed. And I think being a youngster and wanting the limelight of working with famous people, and it fell into my arms.
How do your hair designs contribute to character development in films?
Well, I get a script, and of course, already everyone else has had the script, the actor, actresses, and usually the actor kind of has in mind what they want. They don't wait for me to come in and say, "This is what I think you should have." So it is a collaboration of the director, myself, and the actor or actress. And then we develop from there. And we always have hair and makeup tests and wardrobe tests, sometimes 2, 3 weeks before production even begins. So we can try different things. We could try different wigs, we could try different styles, and then we go in a screening room the next day and then discuss, this looks good. I think I no, I don't like that. Da 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 da. So that's how we kind of develop the character.
Hmm. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's really cool, because, as we all know, film is such a collaborative process, it's not just one person, it's everybody, the director, cinematographer, screenwriter, all of it comes into play to make something really amazing and to change audiences' perspective once they see it on the big screen. So, yeah, so it's really cool that you get to be in this amazing film industry. And yeah, like I'd love to hear more of those stories that you've have, and which kind of brings me into my next question, which is, what have been some of the highlights so far in your hairstyling career?
Of course, being a member of the Academy of National Arts and Sciences was quite an honor to become a member of that. Uh, just working with so many fabulous directors. I did several films with Oliver Stone, and that he's just a genius. Even Soderbergh, I did several Stevens films. So working with some of these brilliant directors, and just the variety of actors that I worked with. The Brad Pitts and the Tim Allen and Harry Connick Jr. and Kevin Bacon, Kevin Costner, Hugh Grant, and then the women, Jennifer Lopez, Jennifer Aniston, Hilary Swank, Julia Roberts, Zoe Deschanel, who's a doll. And so it's just such a variety that I've really enjoyed doing. And the very first time I worked with Julia on Aaron Brockovich, she had mentioned how she loves sausage biscuits and gravy. And so I said, "Well, I make a pretty good one." So it ended up, I made it one time for us. And then it was like whatever location we went on, no matter what part of the country we were, we always had that in the refrigerator for the days that we were off or whatever. So one of the great stories was we were in Vegas and all the actors were staying in their individual villas below the Bellagio. It was Ocean's 11 and we were going to leave the next week. And Julia said, it was Sunday afternoon, we should use up the ingredients for the sausage biscuits and gravy because we're going to be leaving. So why don't we make it for tonight, early dinner? And I said, "For dinner?" I said, and she said, "Yeah, we like it so well, we'll eat it any time of the day." So I said, "Well, let's order a big fruit tray from room service." And so we're in there cooking, and all of a sudden her door knocks, and it's Matt Damon. And he said, "Boy, do I smell something good going down the hall." Because you know how that is when you're in a hotel or anything. And so before you know it, I've got Clooney and Matt Damon and Brad and Don Cheadle. We're all sitting eating my sausage biscuits and gravy. So
Wow.
it became such a thing that I start. I made it for Brad Pitt. I made it for Julia Roberts. And then, of course, Hilary Swank. And then Kristen Stewart got wind of it. Um, so in the Twilight, the original Twilight house in Oregon has my recipe right in the kitchen of the sausage, biscuits, and gravy. And in my book, Continuity by Bonnie Clevering, the recipes in that also. So that was always, kind of a thing that just carried on through the years.
Wow, that's really amazing. Sausage, biscuits, and gravy. That does sound really good right now.
And then when I worked with Hilary Swank in Louisiana, she said, I want you to stay in the guest house because I want you to teach me how to make every kind of pie, rhubarb pie, strawberry, whatever name it. So we had on weekends. We'd be making pies all the time. And then Kristen Stewart, when we were working on Breaking Dawn, it was close to Christmas. And she said, let's make the crew Christmas cookies. And so makeup, hair, and Kristen. We decided which one. So we had a variety. So we each had two recipes. And then I'm thinking we're going to put them on a tray at craft service and we're going to send a tray into the production office. And Kristen says, no, I think we should put them in individual boxes with their name on it. I said, where are we going to get 100 little boxes, the right size? And so sure enough, I found them at Pure One. And so we had someone put all the boxes together. And then I told her, I said, you go ahead and write it. So she wrote everyone's name on each box, and she's a great little cook and great at Mexican food and tacos and that kind of thing. Those always added joy to all my locations because it kind of broke up our long, long hours.
Yeah, that does sound like really, really fun. And yeah, it does take away the stress of, like you said, those long hours of filmmaking because, it can be such a long process. But yeah, just like moments like that, I mean, these great moments working with, Kristen Stewart and George Clooney and Hilary Swank, it does like ease off like some of the stress and the tension that can be on some film sets. I was curious to know, just like working with like Elvis Presley and hearing some stories about that.
Well, he and his buddies were always playing tricks on each other. It was just like who could get who. So we're filming at MGM Studios in the big sound stages. And I thought, I've been on this show long enough that maybe now, we're all hanging out and talking and that. So I think Elvis is going to start trusting that, I'm not going to pull anything on him. So he smokes cigars. And so one day I said, Elvis, I said, let me light your cigar. And I had a Zippo lighter that had the flame control on it. So when I went to light it, it poof, it was this huge flame. And he laughed so hard. But afterwards I thought, oh my gosh, I could have burned off his pompadour.
Oh, she.
And then about a couple weeks later, I thought, okay, this is an old makeup artist joke, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. So there's a thing called spirit gum, and it's a type of glue that you put on the skin, and then you fold this netting of a wig. And it just dissolves in the netting. So you can't see the netting, but it looks like the hair is growing right out of the scalp. So, anyway, the old prank was I put hand lotion on my hands because I knew no matter anytime anyone would say something, he was always kind of back up, like, what's happening. So I put hand lotion on my hands, and then I had this little bottle of the glue. So I said, here, I said, your hands, I found this stuff that's amazing. And so he said, let me smell it. Well, went up that he could smell my hands and not the bottle of glue. And so I poured a lot. And I said, oh, hurry up, rub it all together. And so here his hands are sticking together and it's all gluey and everything. And then, of course, he started laughing because he knew, the joke I pulled. So I got the makeup man to bring some 99% alcohol or acetone to remove it. But the next day he came to work and he said, Bon, he said, I just picked that stuff out of my nails all night long. So they're just fun things, like that went on. But he was just a dream to work with. And he went to the head of the studios in the hair department and asked if I could be on all his films. And even though the makeup man the um, did the makeup and hair on the men, the women hairstylist still did touch ups and certain things. But that was again a point that I wanted to be a wife and a mom, and so I refused it. I told him, and his response was, "I wish I would have said no to more people myself." And he, of course, understood and gave me a hug.
Wow. Wow, that's incredible. I mean, yeah, that's what have been some of those struggles that you faced in your hairstyling career?
I mean, they were positive, but there were some things that I'd never done. And in my early years at MGM, I I was assigned to do Cher just for one day. She was a guest spot on a TV series, It Takes the Thief, or one of the, could have been The Man from Uncle, because I was working on The Girl from Uncle with Stephanie Powers. Anyway, at the time, Cher had the real long, black, slick hair, and she had to be disguised with a blonde, short wig. So there's a process that we do in the film world of getting that hair, her original hair, as tight and close to the head and the scalp, because you want it all to be even. You don't want to just tuck it up like a bathing cap or something. Then there's a big chunk in the back of the wig. That was my first experience, and I did it. It worked because I was taught properly. So that was a challenge. And then something I'd never worked with before. When I did Santa Claus 2 with Tim Allen, that's when he wore the prosthetics, and he had wig as Santa Claus, and then he played different times of his life as not being Santa Claus, as the husband and the father and whatever. So I had different wigs for that. But I had, and the facial and everything was, I call it rubber. And I had never worked with that. So the special effects makeup artist and I worked together, and I learned a lot from that. So it was challenging. And I was a little nervous at the beginning, but then I got it done. And then I think one big challenge was when I got the call to do Kristen Stewart in Eclipse. They had already been filming Eclipse. And before Eclipse, she had filmed the Joan Jett story.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
she had told the producers that when she was going to be doing Eclipse, she would have short black hair because she wanted to really have her own hair and not a wig when she did the Joan Jett film. So she comes to go Eclipse, and they had a wig made for her to look like Bella Swan. And evidently, I get this call, and they'd been filming for a week, and they just didn't like the look. They just felt it looked too much like a wig. So they called me to come up because they knew, I guess, that I was pretty good at doing wigs. And I said, well, first of all, you have to let the makeup and hair department know, because I don't want them to think, oh, we can't do it now. She's coming in. So he called me back. He said, oh, they're thrilled. Well, I had been up there doing a film with Al Pacino, and I knew most of them. So I don't know if they were excited to see me again, or it was getting it off their butt, that they didn't have to deal with this wig and complaints. So anyway, I sat for one whole day in the producer's trailer looking at all the footage that they had end up already had filmed. What I felt I could change and it would be direct cuts, so it wouldn't be that noticeable. It ended up with some of the retakes and some of the cuts in the film. I had heard it was like $1 million to get it all right, and so that was challenging too.
Yeah, yeah,
But then it led to me working with these wonderful producers and her and both of the Breaking Dawns, and then I went on to London, and then I did Snow White and the Huntsman with her.
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, there's definitely a lot of like challenges and problems that can appear like on set, but it's like we've said, like filmmaking is such a collaborative process, just working closely with one another
Right.
is great. And yeah, it's
You
again,
become family. You really
yeah,
do,
you do.
because you're together for so many hours a day, plus for months at a time, and sometimes locations. I remember one of the last films I did with Hilary Swank was in Africa, and we went to work at 10 in the morning and got home the following morning at 6 in the morning. And then once I worked with Oliver, it was next to our last day of shooting. All of a sudden, they get all the crew together and they said, "What we want to do, we want to continue shooting. We want to go into the night scene." And electric and the Grips Electric that would continue staying there and do set up all the scenes with the lighting and whatever. But we could, go home or just go to dinner, take several hours, but we would stay on the clock, which was nice because by then I think we were in triple time, and we all agreed to get the film finished. And so that was like around the clock. That was the longest yet.
Yeah, I can I can understand that. But yeah, but again, because we as artists, because we love it so much, we're willing to put in the work for it. And yes, definitely. And yeah, and this goes for any artists out there in general, not just like filmmakers or people in like the
Sure.
film world, it goes to like, writers and painters, I'm curious, just like, are there any like films that you enjoy or any like directors or actors that have been some of your favorites just off the top of your head?
Well, working with like Steven Soderbergh, we worked different films, different scripts that had some variety, and I feel he's such a great filmmaker. And I also did John Hughes, Curly Sue in Chicago.
Yeah,
And that was John mostly wrote. He didn't direct a lot,
right.
but it was the last film that he ever directed, was Curly Sue. And it's just sitting back and watching like Chris Columbus. Yeah, I worked a few films with Chris, and just sitting back and watching them, it's like, to me, it was a joy. And like working with Pacino, I mean, he was one that I couldn't wait to get to the set and watch his performances. And sometimes I'd go and touch up his hair right before a take, and I'd start walking away, and he'd say, "Bonnie," and I thought, what could have happened to his hair? And and he'd say, "Is it okay?" And he'd kind of like tap me, and he kind of had a thing. I don't know if it brought him luck or whatever, but it was just that touch or something. And so it was just interesting working with these different people, these different creative people that each one in their own way had, certain things that either brought them luck or just watching, the different things that they would do and what they would expect out of everyone. But basically, everyone was there to make a film and they want to do the best they could in their own departments. And so I was just happy to be part of all the ones I worked on.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I'm curious, like, is there any films that like are some of your favorites, like watching wise, like any of your favorite films?
You know what? I love the Shawshank Redemption. I
Ah,
saw
yeah.
it so many times, and you wouldn't think. But then I go to like Under the Tuscan Sun. I've seen that so many times. And then watching some films that before I'd worked with actors, like with Julia, watched some of her films before, Pretty Woman and different ones. And I didn't do um there's a lot of people I worked with that I didn't because I was just with one actor, but the joy of watching uh, other actors, even though I didn't get to know them real well or anything. And that was a joy. Like Kevin Costner, I worked with him a little bit when his hairdresser took sick. But when we did JFK, that whole script and the whole film was so, so interesting to be part of. And Harry Connick Jr., he was great. I worked with him a couple times. And Michael J. Fox, I worked with when he was very, very young. And Robin Williams, I didn't do his hair, but he was on the set all the time. And he was a joy. He just had us in stitches all the time. There was never, I remember before we started working, that was in the makeup trailer, and the other hairdresser was trimming my hair. And Robin walks in, and we had not even met him yet. And he came over and he started like he was a hairdresser. He said, "Oh, honey, let me see." And he started talking like he was French and moving my hair all around and everything. And Bruce Willis, I didn't do his hair, but I did several films with him. My heart just breaks what he's going through now and his family. Kindest man that you'd ever want to meet. Just, yeah, a sweetheart. And
Yeah.
that's where my book, for instance, the continuity comes in
Hmm.
so importantly. Is let's say Julia or Hillary is out in the rain or snow or whatever the elements of the weather. And so I would always take 4 Polaroids, and then we went to 35 millimeters. But these are all my own pictures that I would take the front, the right, and left side and the back of the hair. And I would mark the C number and the date and a description if I like end up using some certain product or whatever in that particular scene for that hair. So then it might be a month later, we show her walking in the door. So that hair has to look exactly, no matter how good, bad, or indifferent it looked outside, it had to look the same as she walked through that door. And so that's where the continuity comes in. And I just have thousands and thousands of pictures. And so in my book, um, there's tons of pictures. And the continuity, life beyond the credits, it's not just that continuity of each scene and the Polaroids and that, but the continuity of life, how people and how I balanced having a family and working and you know ups and downs and things through my life through this whole long period of my career.
Yeah, and I am curious. I do want to get into the book continuity, and I was curious if you could share a poignant story from your memoir that encapsulates perseverance, or just any story in there that in your book that you're very proud of.
I think the balance is, as I've said before, is very, very true in the work and myself. Because I know when I started, as I said, I wanted to have a family, and then we moved from California to Indiana, and then I just worked in a salon. But then my husband's work took us to Dallas. And at the time, Texas had a big tax incentive. So I had to balance because then I got back in the business, and then I balancing having 2 children and a husband and working. And even though most of the films were there in Dallas or TV shows that balancing, that was one of the hardest things to do, but I think I did it okay because I raised two wonderful kids. But balancing your life. And that doesn't matter if you're in the film business or if you're a hairdresser or truck driver or whatever, how you can balance and put energy into both those things. It's not easy. I'm sure you or many people, businessmen, uh, ladies that work at the school cafeteria, knowing you've got a family and then you've got work, but you know you've got to provide, so you have to work because you need the money. And how to do that is, that was always challenging, but evidently it worked for me because I ended up with a good career and I got two great kids. And of course, my husband, like I said, he passed away very young at 55.
But yeah, I mean, it's great that you've had such an amazing career, and being able to find that balance between working in the industry and raising two kids. It's so great that you've been able to be there for both your kids and for the film industry. So it's really great, and I wish you continued success on your career. And I am curious, like, is there any like projects that you're currently working on that are in the
No,
works?
I'm
Or
pretty much retired.
okay.
Yeah, yeah, I retired about 6 years ago, and then Jennifer Aniston called me back because I'd worked with her on Office Space, and so this was years later. But I knew her through working with Brad in uh, different films because she'd come and visit and whatever. But she'd called and wanted me to do a film called Dumpling in Atlanta. And I called both of my kids and I said, I retired a year ago. I don't know what to do. And they said, Mom, you've got to go. So I went to Atlanta and I did that with Jennifer. And so I've gotten a few calls, but pretty much now everyone knows I'm retired. So that's why I put the book kind of on hold, because when I was in England working with Kristen on Snow White and the Huntsman, my son lived in Barcelona, Spain, and he came over to London and he said, we often talked about writing a book. And so we started working on it then. And then we just kind of put it down for several years. And then a couple years ago said, let's get back on it. So it's been great. And so this has been my energy now is all going like I'm doing book fairs and Barnes and Nobles and libraries and things like that. And we have some other things in the works too. But right now, this is my life. Go for it and just always be kind, and better be quiet than anything else. And just show the interest and be willing to really, if you have to start from scratch, you start from scratch and be willing to take that time and learn from others. It doesn't matter what department, if you're male or female, just listen and take time and just have that goal. That's what you want to do and just go after it. Don't ever try to think that you know it all or that you're afraid. Don't be afraid to show your mistakes or your downfalls or whatever, because so many times people don't want to, well, they'll think that I don't know that they're not going to hire me or they're not this and that. They just want you to be honest, and they're glad that you're asking them questions and you're learning from them because that makes them feel so important. They just can't be afraid. Yeah.
Thank you for tuning in to the Troubled Artists podcast. Have a great day.